So there's one thing that this episode didn't really make clear, so I was really confused about. So I just want to ask, because this episode wasn't clear enough about it. Is the Martus, the guest star character, he's from a race of listeners? Is that the case? Is he supposed to be a listener? I'm not sure, because it's not like the episode doesn't remind me every fucking 2 minutes. Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Rivals, which is episode 11 of season 2 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and it is also number 17 on my top 25 worst episodes of the Star Trek franchise list. And this video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the second season episode, Rivals. So Rivals is the episode where we follow Martus, a El-Orian who's from a race of listeners, and the episode makes sure that reminds us of this every 2 minutes, who has a rivalry with Quark because he opens up a club across the promenade and takes all of Quark's customers, so they have this fight. And he also has these gambling devices that apparently control the luck on the station and makes some people very lucky and some people very unlucky, until it causes such problems that Cisco has to go in and destroy them all, and this con artist loses everything he has and has to beg for Quark to give him some money so he can leave the station. So this episode is a prime example of banking an entire episode off of a guest character and why it's risky, because there's plenty of other episodes of Trek where they do an entire episode and make the guest character the main character, and there's some of those episodes that actually work out really well, that are actually really strong. And I read in like the behind the scenes info that the writers had to fight for it, or they had to fight the studio for it, because they think focusing an episode on a guest character is never a good idea. And watching this episode, or the other hypothetical episode that's actually really good, I'm like, whoa, why do they think that? Because that episode's actually amazing. So why would they think that just because it's focused on the guest character, it would not be good? And then I see this episode and I'm like, oh, okay, that's why they think that. Because this episode sucks. It is a prime example of why you shouldn't focus on the guest character. And they get a well-known actor, well, not that well-known, but he played Prince Humperdinck or whatever from Princess Bride, mainly what people know him from. So, and he's a good actor. He's a fairly good actor, does a good job. Even so, the episode falls flat because I don't care about this character. I'm not interested in this character. I couldn't care less on his. I don't find him funny. I don't find him interesting. He's not fleshed out. And then he has a rivalry with Quark. So as far as one of our main characters is involved, I don't give a shit about. I don't care about Quark's profits. I don't care about Quark losing his brother to a competitor. I don't care. That sums up my feelings on this episode. And on top of that, throw in a ridiculous throwaway nonsensical B-plot about luck being controlled on the station. Now, to be fair to this episode, there is one aspect, one slight little storyline that I find not to be terrible, to be at least somewhat interesting character moments and that's with Bashir and O'Brien playing racquetball. Now, it is like the tiniest bit of humorous, but some of the humor just gets a bit too ridiculous, and it is a bit, cartoonish at times with Bashir going like, "Oh, I did all this," and over the top, and O'Brien getting like really flustered with it. It's a bit like over the top at times, but you get some interesting character moments, particularly with you see Keiko trying. Some of the best moments with Keiko and Miles, because a lot of times their relationship on screen just equates to them bickering, and so it's always good when we get scenes with them when they're not just bickering. We see Keiko actually being really supportive of Miles, and so that was interesting. And of course, this is still the beginning of the Miles and Julian friendship, which I believe will really start to blossom in the episode The Armageddon Game, which is coming up soon. But this is still some of the early plantings, like the storyteller in the previous season, and this is sort of the next episode in that step that starts to build a relationship. And you get Bashir like saying, "Oh, I admire O'Brien. I don't want to piss him off, and I don't want to aggravate him," and O'Brien just gets really highly competitive, that Julian's just a much better player. So in that aspect, there's some interesting character moments. But the whole thing about Quark using it to, this is a big match, the challenger and the champion, like, that's just goofy. And also on top of that, they never resolve it. Like, they just stop the match and they don't answer. Like, Quark is like, "Oh, we have so much money and all these people have money. It's like, who's going to win the match?" And they never, resolve it. I mean, at the very least, they could have thrown in a line saying, "Oh, yeah, we had a rematch and Bashir won," or something like that. Or saying, "Oh, we just called it a draw," or whatever, and gave everyone's money back. Like, something. Just throw in a line to explain it, because you're building up throughout the entire episode of, what's going to happen? There's this big match between these two competitors. One positive aspect, because most of the episodes on my top 25 worst list have no positive aspects. And so I was looking at it, my worst list, and I'm thinking, well, does this really deserve to be number 17? Because episodes that are lower than it include Cat's Paw, Coda, or what I mean by lower is not as worse, not as high as number 17. So yeah, Cat's Paw, Coda, The Savage Curtain, Acquisition, The Loss, Distant Voices. Like, these episodes I think have zero positive aspects. Those I think are completely devoid of anything positive. And so I think, this at least has the Bashir and O'Brien racquetball thing, which is at least the tiniest bit interesting, and has some tiny character moments in it. So does this episode really deserve to be worse than all those other episodes? And then I watch it and see how terrible the main storyline with Martus and Quark is. And this does deserve to be higher than that. It is worse, because this main storyline is just so much worse than those episodes I just mentioned. Because, as I was saying with Martus, you don't give a shit about him. Why are we focusing on this character? He just pops up out of nowhere. It's just all of a sudden he's there. Like, the episode starts with him, talking to this older woman. Is like, who is this guy? Why do I care about it? Now, granted, there's some other episodes, as I said, that do start this way, that do introduce a new character, and they start on this new character and actually draw me in and actually get really interested in it. And I'm like, wow, this is actually really good. I am interested in this new guest character. But this episode's not one of them because it doesn't go anywhere. Like, it never developed them. They just make references. Like, the whole El-Orient thing was so, like, they so try to jackhammer that in. They try to shove that in where it doesn't make any sense. And, you know the saying, show not tell? This is not showing us he's an El-Orient. It's just telling us repeatedly, like reminding us over and over again with lines like, oh, I'm not listening, or it says, oh, you're a listener, or Quark being like, I'm listening. Get it? Listening? Because he's a fucking listener. It's not like they don't remind us like billion fucking times. And we don't see that it's funny because I was watching some reviews that was referring to it as like a superpower. I'm like, it's not a superpower. It's a trait. It's more of like a stereotype or a cliche that they're all a species of listeners. Like, what does that even fucking mean? And I'll tell you what, this whole thing was just invented in the first place because they wanted to emphasize that Guinan was a great listener and was a bartender who people would come for their trouble, so they would just... And it's such a dumb, like, Star Trekian thing to do, like, where they just instantly stereotype an entire alien race, like, oh, the Vulcans are logical, the Klingons are warriors, and let's just say, oh, she's the bartender who's supposed to listen to people's problems, so let's say she's from a race of listeners. It's actually a really trying to find the right word, like, it's devoid of creativity and just a really bad writing kind of thing to do. It's just like, it's just an easy, like, oh, race of listeners. It doesn't actually mean anything. It's not a superpower. Like, how is it a superpower? He's not even like a listener. It's supposed to be, oh, they're good at listening to people, so they could use this to manipulate people. But we don't actually see him doing that. Like, okay, so the original idea for this episode was to make him Guinan's son, because Guinan mentioned in an episode that she had a son, and they couldn't get Whoopi Goldberg for this episode, so they wrote that part of it out of it. And goddamn did Whoopi Goldberg dodge a bullet with this one, and the whole character of Guinan did. Now, granted, this episode might have been better with Guinan in it, but you don't want to say that this guy is Guinan's son. Like, oh, god damn. And here's the other thing. As a con man, this guy sucks. Like, and I've heard like other people who review this episode talk about it like that was the intention of the episode, but I don't think it was. I think it was the intention of the writers to say, oh, this is a, con man who's good at manipulating people because he's a good listener. But that's not what we, again, show, not tell, that's not what we see. The fact that he falls from what was a very, 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 very obvious con, from that, older woman who's saying, oh, I do this asteroid mining and all you have to do is give me 10,000 ISICs and I'll triple your profits. Like, obviously that's a con. Anyone who was a con man, who's aware of cons and how cons work, would be able to spot that instantly. So here's the thing. I could chalk this up to, oh yeah, he's a terrible con man and he sucks at his job. But I don't think that's fair. I think what the fair thing to do is to take it out of the universe and be like, this is bad writing. You can't write a con artist who is conned that easily. That just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't fucking work that way. It's like, I'm trying to think of an example. It's like writing a doctor who like doesn't know how to treat like a cold or something that's that's easy to treat that everyone their mother knows how to do, and the doctor doesn't even know how to do something that everyone who don't even have a medical degree knows how to do. It's kind of like that. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but I think you get what I'm getting at. Like, the lay person can obviously that's a con. Now, granted, because of the internet and phone stuff, like, the scamming is a hell of a lot more common, and so people nowadays are probably a bit more savvy out of necessity, because there's a lot more scams going on. So out of necessity, people have to try to be more savvy into scams and cons in order to protect themselves more so than they did back in the 90s. So maybe you take that into account. So maybe I am looking at it through like a modern lens. And plus, I've seen a lot of like shows that came out after this that about con men and conning, and like Lost with Sawyer and whatnot, that make it more than obvious. But I think even taking all that into account, if stranger comes up to you and says, give me $10,000 and I'll be able to triple your money, and they do it they don't outright say that. They tell you this sob story and try to get you hooked and try to get you invested. Obviously, that's a goddamn con. Like, I'm sorry. It's so obvious that people in the 90s, the layperson in the 90s, would be able to tell that. And I'm like, oh, she's conning him. And yet we're meant to believe that this guy, as a profession, cons people. So that's his whole life. That's what he does. He knows how to manipulate people. He knows what to say. He knows what to spot. And like trying to lure people in with the sob story and get their defenses down, and then slowly make it seem like it's their idea to give them, to give him their money. So someone who does that for a living would be able to spot this a million miles away. So no, I'm not even willing to go the in-universe route and say this guy is an idiot. I'm just gonna spot this down as terrible writing that I do not buy for an instant. This is some of the worst writing I've seen. So we have this boring character who they keep telling us and not showing us his character traits and his species cliche, who's written terribly because we're meant to believe he's a con man, yet he's conned very easily, so he's unbuyable as a character. And so he's our through in this episode. We're meant to follow him as he tries to con this older woman into letting her use, so that she lets him use her space for this new club or whatever, which is boring and uninteresting. And it's also cliche when he starts hitting on the Dabo girl, quite creepily, just like rests his head on her breast or whatever without even talking to her. Like, she has no lines because the producers are too cheap to actually pay this actress for lines, so they just wanted her to. That's the same shit they do with Morn. That's why Morn never speaks, because the production's too cheap to fucking pay them, because once an actor has lines, they get a lot more money. And so, but it comes off as creepy that she's just silent the whole time. He's just like putting his head on her boobs without asking. But he does that, and so the older lady can catch him doing it and be like, oh, you. It's like almost like a Harry Mudd type thing. It's like, and I say that with all the disdain that I can muster with how terrible Harry Mudd is. Like, this guy is worse, honestly. And that, if you know how I feel about Harry Mudd, that you will understand that is a bold statement for me to say that this guy is worse than Harry Mudd. He is. He's more poorly written, less thought is put into him. The only good thing about him is that they got a good actor to play him. But good acting can only go so far. It cannot save terrible, terrible writing that is empty, just like this. It just can't. And So yeah, so we're meant to follow this character and care that he's having this feud with Quark and that he's getting good luck and then he gets bad luck. We're supposed to care. We are supposed to care. Why the fuck in the world would anyone care about this is what I want to know. Like, I was actually surprised because I watched quite a few reviews that were positive on this episode. And I'm just like, why? Like, granted, no one loved this episode. At least no one I saw. They all were like, "Oh yeah, it was okay. It was fine. It was enjoyable. It was funny." I guess that's the main thing people say. Fun. Whenever an episode is terrible and people like it, even though it's obviously terrible, the excuse always given is it's fun. This is not fun. Now granted, as I said, the Bashir and O'Brien racquetball stuff is kind of fun, so I'll give them the sliver of that. But the Quark, now, I'm not that big on Quark as a character, especially in these early seasons. He's just the typical. I don't like the Quark Rom relationship. I recently peeked an episode from season 5 about Rom, and he's just like such a better character in later seasons. Like, I again reaffirm they retconned him 100%, but it was a good retcon because they made his character way better. Like, you watch those later seasons with Rom, and they really found a really sweet spot with his character where he's kind of this dumb, goofy guy, but in a lovable, adorable way, and that he's actually a technical genius and he's likable. Whereas this early version of Ram is just kind of pathetic and despicable and annoying and scheming and conniving, and you just don't give a shit about him. Like when he's bitching about, oh, Quark did all these horrible things to me as a kid, and Martus is just telling him to shut up. I'm not right there with him. Like, I don't care, Ram. I just don't. This character's just not interesting at all at this point in stage. And, yeah, and I don't care about Quark. I don't, when no customers are showing up and all of his customers went to, what's his name, Martus or Matris or whatever his name is. I really don't care. Like, this is the plot of the episode. This is what the threat or whatever, the tension is all based around this guy stealing Quark's customers. Like, why the fuck would I care about that? Why? Oh my god. Like, I guess some people find that funny. I don't see what's funny about it. I think it's boring, and I just could not possibly give a shit about it if I tried. Martus. That's Martus Mazur. Yeah, that's his name. Now, some people are saying he was meant to be a recurring character. Thank God. Thank the gods that he was not a recurring character. That would have been awful. Alright, so now let's talk about the luck devices. First of all, it's this little ball that lights up and goes, it's a game. You get it, it's a game. They keep referring to it as a game. But what it essentially is, it's a ball. You press a button, it lights up. If you win, it goes woo, and it lights up, very bright. If you lose, it goes, and it's like a red light or whatever. And that's it. That's the game. Pressing a button, and it randomly decides if you win or lose, and that's considered a game. That's not a fucking game. Sorry, just flat out, it's not a game. It's a kid's toy. You just press it, and it goes, boot, win, boot, lose. Not a game. As some people are comparing it to slot machines, but I think that even that's not fair. I never played slot machines from what I understand. Like, you pull a lever And I think it depends on what time you pull the lever when you see the thing spinning and you try to get it so it spins. Like, that's how it worked in the Super Mario Brothers game that I played where they had a slot machine. You had to push it right at the right time to try to line up the three things. So even then there's some, like, level of skill toward it or chance, whereas this thing you just press a button and it randomly says you win or it randomly says you lose. That is not a game. It's a kid's toy. Like, Quark even refers to, oh, this is a child's toy, it's useless, and I'll just give it to my son as a throwaway thing. He's right. But the episode's trying to tell us, like, he's trying to manipulate or play Martus because he sees how valuable, how great these little ball things are. What? That's worse than the bullshit they did in Move Along Home. I know a lot of people like to complain about the Chula game makes no sense. Well, it makes more sense to the fucking ball that just lights up. Like, what is so interesting about it? Like, I don't get it. And then we get into the whole storyline about the luck. Now, as much as I was ragging on the Martus character and how terrible and uninteresting and boring and dumb and unrealistic and poorly written this character is, you couple that with the storyline where these balls are controlling the luck on the station. What in the actual fuck? Like, I was thinking as I was watching this episode that this was a TNG type storyline that DS9 doesn't normally do, that this is, the playing with the weird anomaly thingies. But, I think that's giving too much credit to this storyline. I don't think it's even that good. It's below that. Like, this is so below what D Space Nine is and what it does, and so beneath it, it's like I can't even mention it. It's so goofy, so cartoonish, so simplistic, so ridiculous, and so stupid. I really don't understand why D Space Nine would do this. That the luck is making people like Kira knock into things because she has bad luck, and Dax is getting this great computer program because she has good luck, and then it disappears when she starts having bad luck, and that these balls, because Martus replicated larger versions of that game, and they're like these big balls, and they start to control all of the luck around the station, where there's thousands of people on the station, or hundreds getting bad luck, while hundreds of others are getting really good luck. I always try to find ways to articulate myself rather than just using simplistic language. But in this case, I'm really stumped because I don't really know how else to describe that storyline other than the dumbest shit I've ever seen in my life. Like, I don't really have any complex way to articulate it. It's just dumb. It's just mind-boggling, shockingly, like, dumb. It's just dumb. Like, really? The luck is controlling everything in the station, and then, like, that's why when you get the racquetball match, and this is part of what ruins the racquetball storyline, by the way. The one, as I said, slightly good aspect of this episode is ruined because it's taken over by this stupid luck storyline where Bashir is, like, rackets breaking, like, this is almost like a so bad it's good moment when Bashir's racket breaks. So, like, I laugh hysterically, not with the episode, at the episode, with how dumb that is. That, Bashir's falling over himself because the luck's controlling the station. Now, to be fair, though, there is a misconception about this episode I want to clear up, because several reviews I watched stated that neutrinos were affecting people's luck. But that's not what the episode is saying. In fact, Dax even says that, like, flat out. Because when she brings up how the neutrinos are spinning, like they're not all spinning in the right direction or whatever, and it's improbable that couldn't happen. Apparently that's really scientifically inaccurate, but let's put that aside. That doesn't really matter. The point is that when Kira asks about the neutrinos, she even says, "Oh, so you're saying neutrinos are affecting the luck in the station?" She's like, "No, but it is a symptom of the same problem." So in other words, neutrinos are not causing the bad luck. It's just the same thing that's causing the bad luck is also causing the neutrinos to act weird. So in other words, it's just a sign that the luck is being manipulated on this. This is so fucking stupid. The luck is, but that's what the storyline's saying. So it's kind of even worse because it's not like some, the typical sci-fi, Star Trek, fantasy magic shit that we normally get. Because if they had neutrinos affecting it, then maybe it would be. But it's not even saying that. It's just flat out saying these giant balls that flash colors are controlling the probability laws of everyone around them, including the neutrinos. So the neutrinos is just one other thing, as well as the people, as well as the racquetball or whatever, as well as the equipment that is being affected by the magical luck balls. Oh my god! And I need a second here. This is just, yeah. I mean, this is not fun. I'm not having fun with something that is this stupid. So yeah, the luck. Everyone's having bad luck and good luck, including the neutrinos. I'm just at a loss. I don't know what else to say. So let me talk about my personal memories from watching this episode. So when I first saw this episode, I have a good memory of it because I wasn't really paying attention. I was actually hanging out with my sister who is listening to Bjork. And she was watching this episode at the same time, but she had it on mute and had the closed captions so you could see it. And I wasn't really paying attention to the episode. I'm like, who the hell is this fucking guy? And why do I care about him? So I was just listening to Bjork more than I was paying attention to this episode. So that's the good memory I have. It makes me, so watching this episode makes me want to go listen to Bjork. Have a much better time listening to Bjork than watching this piece of shit. Anyway, I would like to thank my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It does help me continue with the channel. I'd like to give a big special thanks to Jordan Johnson, Brandon Neal Howes, and Antarius. Thank you all so very, very much for your strong support. I'd also like to give a shout out to Benjamin Mead, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joe Lavals, Alessandro, Nicholas Sear, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So we do have a few patron comments on this episode, and I lost my place, which I thought I had. So I have to find my place again. Give me a second. Alright, a few Patreon comments on this episode. First comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, "The scenes with O'Brien and Bashir I liked. I always loved Quark as the devious bastard you love to hate. The spinning thing was okay until I started to affect people in the station. If a replicator can do this, I guess it may be able to clone people soon. Maybe it will become self-aware and make Terminators to purge the galaxy of life. So my rating is 5, oh, won't somebody please think of the children out of 10. Well, to be fair, the replicator just replicated what the ball already does. So it's not like the replicator chose to control the luck. This tiny ball controlled the... Oh, God, I fucking hate this. And if the tiny ball controlled the luck, they just made it into a bigger ball. So whatever it was doing, it was just doing it more because it's bigger. I don't know. I don't think the replicators are ready to make Terminators yet because of that. It's a different thing. Now, if somebody replicated like a tiny version of a Terminator and replicated into a bigger version of a Terminator, that's kind of more the analogy. But anyway, next comment is from Norman Buchwald, who says, thank goodness this guy was not Guinan's son. Talk about indirect character assassination. If that happened. The reason this episode flops is the focus on this guy who is really not interesting, even if he is competing against Quark, and Quark is the focus. Meanwhile, the B story, I guess, continues to bond Bashir and O'Brien, but still, hardly an interesting story. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels was out about a year or two before this episode, so yeah, of course, the widow is the real scam artist. Who did not see that coming? As for the devices, less interesting than a slot machine. Let's see. If you're not playing or rooting for a loved one, watching a slot machine go and go again is boring. A ball with lights is even less interesting. One elaborate Bashir spring ball uniform out of 10. I think they did clarify that spring ball is actually different from what we see in this episode, that this is actual racquetball. It's just supposed to be futuristic racquetball, which is why the court looks different. Apparently they made the court look very, supposed to be, it wasn't direct square rectangle. They made it have all these different walls in order to make it futuristic, but it actually made it very difficult to film and made filming nearly impossible, which is I think why they never did it again. Now in season 4 we do see Kira playing spring ball, which I think looked kind of similar to this, but I don't remember it exactly. I think it was different. I don't think it was the same set. And because they had like stands, but I'll have to wait till I get to that episode to see, but I'm pretty sure that it wasn't the same thing. But regardless, yeah, Bashir's outfit, well, to be fair, that's one of the funny things about the episode, to be fair, but it's not enough to save this piece of shit. Anyway, next comment is from Kyrie091, who says, rivals more like booty crap. Come to Quark's. Quark's is fun. Come right now. Don't walk. Just please find a way to load a hyperspray. I will give you the sign. Just aim for my lads. 'Tis the glory we stare to find something new in this wonderful year. I don't know. I don't remember this episode except that it was about Quark. So I started with the Quark song and ended up doing a bunch of other Trek songs. Next time we'll do The Lady is a Tramp as performed by Rum. Let's not, please. Anyway, don't walk, run. Next comment is from Ricky, who says this episode is dog shit. I mean, absolutely terrible. The Humperdinck character, who I guess is the same alien species as Guinan, was an awful character, and I didn't give a shit about him for somebody who is supposed to be a great con man and should never let people get the upper hand, and yet he falls for the biggest bullshit from this woman, and he lost everything. Also, those spinning balls that create luck, and Quark has this all over, was so dumb. Also, I didn't care for the Bashir and O'Brien match either, so my rating is a 1 out of 10. Yeah, the balls, to call them spinning is giving them too much credit. They just glow different colors. They go like I'm sorry, people complain about the Chula game from Move Along Home, but this is like 10 times worse. Anyway, Next comment is from Antarius, who says, there are some really bad aspects of this episode. The story about some strange devices able to alter neutrino spins is just nonsense and is a throwback to the worst days of Season 1. Who would play such a stupid game? And these devices are rather big. Is there a public XXL replicator on board of DS9, because the normal Food replicators are clearly too small to produce something with this size. But I liked most of the character stories, and there were some good moments. Quark calling Bashir and O'Brien with a fake emergency and blackmailing them with the orphans. Rom switching sides. Siska reminding Quark that he blackmailed him in the first episode. Quark failing at being a good listener and paying his rival to leave the station. Yes, these moments were not that funny, but still enjoyable, so I will give this episode a positive rating, 6 out of 10. Well, Antarius, we will have to respectfully agree to disagree on those being interesting moments. I didn't like any of them, but that is just me. And also, I think there is. Like, it would make sense for them to have a bigger replicator, so if people want to replicate, like, things that are other than food, and they hint at it early on. Like, I don't think I can't remember if it was DS9 or TNG, but someone was like, oh, I replicated you this guitar or something. So they would need to have a bigger replica. They can't go to the tiny food slots. So naturally you would think that they would have bigger replicators. But yeah, if to replicate those huge balls, it would have to be quite big. But I'm sure there would be. It would make sense to me. Anyway, thank you, patrons, for your comments. So my rating for Rivals out of 10 is a 1. The worst. I mean, obviously, you've seen this one coming. Of course, I'm going to give this episode a 1, even though I can't say it's completely devoid of anything positive, because I got the slightest sliver of enjoyment out of the O'Brien Bashir storyline, particularly, seeing the origins of their friendship and seeing Keiko actually, be a loving, supporting wife to Miles. But even that is only a small bit of the storyline. The storyline overall, I thought, was dumb, but nowhere near as bad as the main thrust of the episode of fucking focusing on a boring, terribly written, uninteresting con man who sucks at his job so badly that he's conned by someone else who fucking obviously is a con man, having a feud with Quark, who I could not give a shit about his personal business and his bar, or Rom bitching about his childhood. And on top of that, we get a stupid, childish, ridiculous, idiotic, dumb storyline about luck being controlled by these magical balls, and that people are so fascinated in wanting to play these balls where all you have to do is press the fucking button and it lights up. It's so worse than Move Along Home. I'm just blown away by people who could say this is a decent episode and Move Along Home is one of the worst episodes of the show. I like, what is wrong with your brain? Like, how can you think that? Sorry, I don't mean to get personal, but it's like this episode is just so bad. It's so bad. Number 17 on my top 25 worst list. If anything, I think it should be higher. But anyway, that is it for my review of Rascals. Not Rascals, I just get my terrible episodes confused. Rivals, and it's our word. But anyway, that is it for my review of Rivals. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, just how terrible is this episode? Or are you one of those people who think it's not terrible? possible. But anyway, go ahead, leave your comments below. And if you would really like to support the channel, you can support me on Patreon. There's a link in the description below. Different tiers for different budgets, different rewards, such as pre-releases. You can leave comments that I'll read in my videos, and Patreon-only series that I do of revisited videos where I revisit reviews that I've already made. And higher level tiers, you can do stuff like request a video for me to make, get pre-releases, stuff like that. So let's see what's coming up next on the old channel here. Let me find my spot. Where are we? Okay, so Thursday will be my review of Lower Deck Season 5, Episode 7. Saturday, we'll be reviewing The Pegasus. And then Monday, I'll review The Alternate, back to DS9. And then Wednesday, back to TNG with my review for Homeward. So that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check it out as I continue to cover Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Next Generation, one episode at a time, and many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.